You're listening to Bible Thoughts, a podcast from Coram Deo Church. Bible Thoughts is all about taking small bites out of God's Word wherever you are and just chewing on them for a bit. My name is Rusten Harris. I'm your host. Thanks for listening. All right, we are jumping into Bible Thoughts today, considering the theme of work. And I began this consideration with the last episode, with just briefly considered it in the last episode, considering cultivating holy habits. And I've got a couple episodes lined up, specifically addressing more in detail a kind of biblical theology of work and labor. And so today we're going to be looking at Genesis 1:26 to 28. That's the very beginning of the story where we get our first instances of work. So let's go ahead and read it. Here we go. Genesis 1:26 to 28. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." All right, this passage is the climactic passage in the creation story. It's all about the sixth day, the final creative acts of God in the creation story. And God here is capping off his creation by creating humanity. And in this passage, we learn some fundamental defining characteristics of humanity and what humanity is for. So first, we read that God made humanity in his image. And because of this, humanity has a profound dignity. Humanity was made to reflect the goodness and the value of God in the world. This is where we get our foundational bedrock understanding of the sanctity of human life. Our value is derivative, but it is derivative from an infinitely valuable source. There's nothing else in creation that is said to be made in the image of God. And that is what we see in this passage. And then second, God made humanity male and female. Male and female. We see that reflected when the line says, "In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." Now, in this episode, I'm not going to get really deeply into what that means, that we're created male and female. I'm going to save that for a future episode on man and woman as co-laborers as made by God as co-laborers to image him. But those are two key things we see about being made in the image of God. And then after, another thing we see in this passage is that it says that God blessed humanity. God blessed them. This means that God's design for humanity was blessedness. Now, this word often gets kind of translated in our head as just like a religious word for good, which in some ways it is. But what the word means, really, blessed, to be blessed, is to be made happy. Okay? It means happiness. When God creates the world, he makes it very good. And humanity is the climax of this goodness, and this goodness is the kind of goodness which, by being made in the image of God and being made to reflect his goodness, humanity experiences that reality as the most true, transcendent happiness, joy, and flourishing that could possibly exist. So God made us to live blessed lives that are full of joy and happiness and living in reflection of our God, who is himself the very fount of goodness and joy. And then we see that God gives humanity, made in his image, a specific task. And that's where I'm going to spend most of the time here. But it's really important to consider that task in light of these other things we see as well. And some of those things we'll unpack in other episodes, but that notion of being made in the image of God, being blessed, flow into the task, okay? It's important not to think of that task as separated from the fact that we are made in the image of God. This task rather flows out of being made in the image of God. And this actually follows a pattern that we see in the creation narrative that we've read before. And here's what I mean by that. This is something that will help you understand how God works in the world and in history, and it all starts in the creation story. And it's a pattern we see in the creation days, and it's a pattern that man being given this task is actually one of the second iterations of this pattern. Here's what I mean by that. On the first day, God creates light. Okay, He separates the light from darkness, and He calls the light day, and He calls the dark night. And now you might read that and think, on the first day, God made the sun. Surely, because that's where we get our day and night from. But actually, as you read the days further, you learn that He has actually not yet made the sun, He has not yet made the stars, and He has not yet made the moon. Rather, that takes place on the fourth day. And this is one of those things that a lot of people look at the creation days and go, oh, this is just nonsense. But it's actually profoundly theologically important, and it shows us a way that God works. And so here's what I mean by that. He makes the sun on the fourth day, and it says that He made the sun as the great light to rule the day, and He made the moon and the stars as the lesser lights to rule the night. And that's the pattern. God's initial light created on the first day is His own radiance. It's not coming from anywhere in creation. It's not coming from the sun or the stars. It's coming directly from God's creative act. This God who rules over all the works of His hands, who rules over all heavens and the earth that He creates. Then on the fourth day, He makes created things, specifically the sun, the moon, and the stars, and He delegates to them this rule. He delegates the rule of the greater light to the sun, and He delegates the rule of the lesser light during night to the moon and the stars. Okay, and we see something incredibly similar in this passage about humanity. Okay, God is the creator of all things. He rules over all the things that He creates. He has dominion. He has rule. And yet, on the sixth day, when He creates man in His image, He delegates to Him rule. And He delegates to Him dominion over the creation that He made and which belongs to Him. And so we read this part here. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And then again He says, be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Part of the image of God is man ruling over creation. Just like God rules over creation, we are being delegated this rule from God, from whom this rule comes. And that's really important for considering what this rule looks like. It's not something we get to just make up as we go. This rule, this dominion, is supposed to reflect the God who delegates it to us. So, what is the task? This task, I've already mentioned dominion, but specifically we read it's a task to be fruitful, to fill the earth, to subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds, and over every creeping thing. Okay, and this is where it all comes into this theology of labor. What that task requires, what that role of dominion requires, is work. It requires labor. It requires husbands and wives being fruitful. Again, I'm not going to talk about that particular part in this episode. Wait for another one. And it requires that this call requires that we subdue and have dominion. Okay, that's what theologians often will refer to as the cultural mandate or the dominion mandate. This is a call to reflect God in creativity. and to rule in the world as God rules, using the way that he made us. God made us this way, and so we will work and create things always. This is an inescapable reality of what it means to be made in the image of God. Human beings are creating things because they were made in the image of a creator. We create tools, we create art, we create music, we create all these things. Now, we do it in a derivative way. We do it in a delegated way. God's creation is ex nihilo. It comes out of nothing. So everything we do is a kind of creaturely mimicry, but it's still a mimicry, which is an imaging of the God in whose image we were made. So here's a question. What does it mean to subdue it? It means to creatively take control of God's creation, to dig, to discover, to enjoy its riches for God's glory. And that requires enacting an entrepreneurial creativity to invent new, efficient ways of ruling over creation. This word, subdue, is a strong word. And it's important to kind of frame this word. It is a strong word that reflects the word dominate. Okay, you can't get around the strongness of the word. It means to subdue. Now, we will hear that word subdue, and we will import all kinds of nasty variations of what subdue can mean. Now, here's a key thing. When God calls us to subdue and have dominion, he always does so in order to reflect his dominion. And when God created the world, he created it with a goal, a telos in mind. And that goal was his glory. And so when we subdue creation, when we take dominion and control over it, we're supposed to do so in a way that goes with the grain of the nature God made, with the grain of the universe, as it were. And then what is that grain made for? It's made to glorify God. So that's an important boundary or perimeter we are thinking about and limited to when we consider what it means to subdue creation. Now, think about what this would mean at the most basic level. And this is where it kind of gets fun to think about what Scripture is actually setting us up for here. What does it mean, just for example, to have dominion over the fish of the sea? Well, that would involve the task and work of knowledge and learning, understanding, for instance, how the tides work in relation to the moon. It would involve understanding water currents and water temperatures. It would involve understanding the seasons and life cycles of fish. It would involve understanding different bodies of water, saltwater, freshwater, etc. It basically involves the entire science of marine science and biology. Okay, and then it also involves technology. It involves understanding the physics of water and buoyancy in order to make boats, because it's kind of hard to exercise dominion over something you can't even really get out into. So it involves understanding forestry and which trees are the best for making boats. It involves weaving and fabric making in order to make sails for boats. It involves a special breed of carpentry called boat making. So this involves technology as well. Okay, it also involves the art of fishing. It involves the practice of twine making for the sake of net making. It involves understanding the eating habits of fish and how to lure them with bait. It involves understanding the best way to find fish. It involves hook making and potentially even metal making in order to make hooks. So in this single example of dominion over the fish of the sea, we have just uncovered several things that you might actually call careers, sciences, and crafts. And this is all built into this doctrine, this theology of being made in the image of God, and this pre-fall command to have dominion over creation. It's important to remember that. This all happens, and these commands are given before the fall, before sin entered the world. A lot of times we look at our work and our labor and we think, oh, this is just a product of sin because we just dislike it so much. But really, that would be, oftentimes that would be under the heading of toil. Okay, and that's something we can talk about in a future episode as well, this idea of how work has been made difficult through sin. But work itself is a part of being made in the image of God. And the dominion mandate is something we all get to participate in through our careers. Now, there's another element of this dominion mandate that's also super helpful and important as well. And that's that this is the stuff that cultures are made of. This idea of dominion is actually a fundamental theme in the Bible. And if you don't understand this theme, you're going to be confused about a lot of what happens throughout the story, because it's a story and things develop as culture does with time. And this dominion mandate theme contains within it the entire trajectory of history. God has set up creation with an infancy, as it were, and he has a goal for it to grow into something. He wants the earth to be filled with image bearers who are participating in this mandate. That's how he sets it up. Now, if you understand what the goal of creation is, you got to understand what the beginning of creation is. What seed in the first chapter of Genesis is God's intention for the world. It's this intention of fruitfulness and multiplication of image bearers that fill the earth and reflect his goodness through their God-given task of labor and dominion. Now, like I said, this theme of God delegating to humanity his rule and reign is the theme of history, for better or for worse. It's a terrible thing when humanity exercises dominion in sin and perversion, and it's a wonderful thing when humanity exercises dominion in a way that reflects his goodness, truth, and beauty. And the reality is that humanity falls later in the story. I'm not going to get too much into that, but he falls later in the story, and that's why Christ came. And redemption looks like getting to participate in this in a way that is redeemed. So I want to end by thinking about something that this is all tied to, and that's the Workweek. This theological truth has profound applications for our days and our weeks, because this is the stuff that we fill most of our week with: our careers, our labor, our jobs. God has made us for this work of dominion. And it's so encouraging to consider that our work and our labor is participating in the way that God made us to image his goodness. I don't know about you, but it's very difficult to have a job and not know that it has some deeper meaning behind it. Well, here it is, right here. God made you to do hard work, to image his goodness and his creativity in the work you do. And it's so encouraging to know that what we spend much of our week on is the kind of thing that God was after from the very beginning, so that we could glorify him in it. Thanks for listening to Bible Thoughts. Hope you enjoyed this episode on work and dominion. Until next time, keep chewing on the word.